13.8 billion years ago, there was no Earth, no Sun, no stars, and no us. Then the universe began to expand, and from that single moment began an extraordinary journey that created atoms, formed stars, built planets, gave birth to life, and ultimately led to us. Welcome to the channel. I am your host, and today we will discover where our story truly began. This is the complete story of human evolution. Part 1. Chapter 1, The Beginning. Imagine that you are traveling backward through time. Slowly, the Earth disappears. Then the Sun is gone as well. After that, the entire solar system ceases to exist. The Milky Way vanishes. One by one, all galaxies disappear. Now there are no stars, no planets, and not even space as we know it. And if we continue moving further back in time, we reach a point where, according to our current understanding, all the matter and energy in the observable universe existed in an extremely hot and incredibly dense state. Now there is one very important point to understand. The Big Bang does not mean that a bomb exploded in empty space. This is the most common misunderstanding. In reality, space itself did not exist beforehand. The correct way to understand the Big Bang is that space itself began to expand. In other words, the very stage upon which the entire universe would eventually form began to come into existence at that moment. Time also began along with this process. That is why when we ask, what existed before the Big Bang? Scientists say that the question is not as straightforward as it seems, because time itself is believed to have begun with this event. Now think of a balloon with small dots drawn on its surface. As the balloon inflates, all of the dots move farther apart from one another. The dots are not running across the surface. Rather, the surface itself is expanding. The expansion of the universe can be understood in the same way. Galaxies are not flying through space away from us. Instead, space itself is stretching. This is why distant galaxies appear to be constantly moving farther away. Immediately after the Big Bang, the universe was so hot that atoms could not form. The temperature was so extreme that matter and energy were continuously converting into one another. But as the universe expanded, its temperature began to fall. You can think of this like steam escaping from a pressure cooker. As the steam expands, it gradually cools. In the same way, the expanding universe underwent a cooling process. When the temperature dropped sufficiently, quarks combined to form protons and neutrons. Then, within the first few minutes, the nuclei of hydrogen and helium formed. This was an extremely important step, because these elements would later become the foundation of stars and galaxies. However, electrons were still too energetic to attach to these nuclei and form stable atoms. Now let us move forward about 380,000 years. By this time, the universe had cooled enough for electrons to bind to nuclei. Complete atoms formed for the first time. And at this moment, something extraordinary happened. Before this, light was constantly scattering off charged particles. But once atoms formed, light was finally able to travel freely through space. The universe became transparent. That ancient light still surrounds us today. It is called the cosmic microwave background, or CMB. You can think of it as a baby picture of the universe. Just as a childhood photograph helps us understand what a person looked like early in life, the CMB shows us what the universe looked like in its infancy. Now comes the most important question. How do we know all of this? Is it merely a theory? No, there is strong scientific evidence supporting it. The first major evidence emerged in the 1920s, when Edwin Hubble discovered that nearly all distant galaxies are moving away from us. Moreover, the farther a galaxy is, the faster it appears to recede. This means that the universe is not static, it is expanding. If everything is moving apart today than in the past, everything must have been much closer together. The second major evidence came in 1965, when Arno Penzias and Robert Wilson detected a uniform microwave signal coming from all directions in the sky. This was not ordinary noise. It was the residual heat left over from the early universe. Later, satellites such as COBE, WMAP, and Planck mapped this radiation with extraordinary precision. The third line of evidence comes from the chemical composition of the universe. If the Big Bang model is correct, then the amounts of hydrogen and helium should exist in a specific ratio. Observations show that most of the universe is indeed made of hydrogen and helium in exactly the proportions predicted by theory. When different fields such as astronomy, physics, and observational cosmology all arrive at the same conclusion, scientists gain very strong confidence in the result. That is why the Big Bang is considered one of the best supported models in all of modern science. Even so, science honestly acknowledges that many mysteries remain. How exactly did cosmic inflation occur? What is dark matter? What is dark energy? And did anything exist before our observable universe? Research on these questions is ongoing, but one conclusion is now remarkably secure. About 13.8 billion years ago, the universe began to expand. That expansion gave rise to matter. Matter formed stars. Stars forged heavier elements. Those elements formed planets. On one small rocky planet, life emerged. And billions of years later, the result of that process is you. This means that your story did not begin at birth. Your story did not begin with human civilization. Your story did not even begin with Earth. In truth, your story began at the moment when the universe first started to expand. When you look up at the night sky, you are not looking at something separate from yourself. You are looking at your own origin. Chapter 2, First Atoms. So far, we have seen that after the Big Bang, the universe began to expand. But at that time, there was one very important problem. The universe existed, but there were still no atoms. No hydrogen, no helium, no molecules, and none of the matter that would later form stars, planets, and life. So the question is, if nothing existed in a structured form at the beginning, how did the universe create its first building blocks? To understand this, we must travel to the first few minutes after the Big Bang. Immediately after the Big Bang, the temperature of the universe was so high that no stable structure could form. It was like heating water so intensely that no piece of ice could survive. In the same way, particles in the early universe were colliding constantly and preventing any stable combinations from forming. As the universe expanded, its temperature gradually began to decrease. With cooling, conditions started to change. The energy became low enough for the most fundamental particles, quarks, to join together and form protons and neutrons. If we think of quarks as bricks, then protons and neutrons were the first finished building blocks from which the walls of matter would eventually be constructed. By about 1 second after the Big Bang, these particles existed in enormous numbers throughout the universe, but the temperature was still extremely high. Then about 3 minutes later, conditions became suitable for protons and neutrons to combine and form the first atomic nuclei. This marked the beginning of a process known as Big Bang nucleosynthesis. The name may sound technical, but its meaning is simple. Nucleosynthesis means the creation of atomic nuclei. During this process, the universe produced primarily two elements, hydrogen and helium. Hydrogen is the simplest element. Its nucleus contains only one proton. The nucleus of helium contains 2 protons and 2 neutrons. A tiny amount of lithium was also formed, but nearly all visible matter in the universe was created in the form of hydrogen and helium. Here, it is important to understand one thing. Complete atoms had still not formed. Only nuclei existed. Electrons were still in such a high-energy state that they could not bind to nuclei and create stable atoms. Even so, this step was extraordinary, because hydrogen and helium would later become the fuel for stars. And stars are the cosmic factories that produced carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, iron, and all the other heavy elements, the very elements from which our bodies are made. In other words, if hydrogen and helium had not formed in the early universe, stars would never have existed. Without stars, heavier elements would never have formed. And without heavier elements, planets, oceans, and life would never have come into existence. Now the question arises, how do scientists know that these were the elements formed in the beginning? The answer lies in remarkably powerful scientific evidence. When physicists performed calculations based on the Big Bang model, they predicted that the early universe should consist of approximately 75% hydrogen and about 25% helium by mass. When astronomers observed the actual universe, they found that the measured abundances closely matched this ratio. This is one of the most impressive successes in all of science. First, theory made a prediction, then observations confirmed it. The universe displayed exactly the composition that physics had already calculated, but one more crucial step still remained. Although nuclei had formed, complete atoms still did not exist. The universe was still so hot that electrons were constantly being knocked away from nuclei. Imagine trying to connect magnets while a violent storm keeps tearing them apart. This situation continued for approximately 380,000 years. Then the temperature dropped enough for electrons to attach permanently to nuclei, and for the first time, complete atoms were formed. Hydrogen atoms and helium atoms began to fill the universe. Now the universe possesses its first true building blocks. These atoms later gathered under the influence of gravity. From them, the first stars were born. Stars formed galaxies. Within galaxies, planetary systems emerged. And on one small rocky planet, billions of years later, life began. When you look at your own body, you should realize that this story truly begins with these first atoms. Most of the hydrogen in your body was created in the early universe. The hydrogen atoms in the water molecules within your body are almost as old as the universe itself. This means that some of the atoms inside you are 13.8 billion years old. Those atoms are witnesses to the beginning of time. Chapter 3, First Light. So far, we have seen that after the Big Bang, the universe began to expand, and then the first atoms such as hydrogen and helium were formed. But even at that time, the universe was not as we see it today. There were no stars, no galaxies, and no planets. The cosmos was filled only with hydrogen and helium gas. The universe existed, but it was still completely dark. The question now is, when there was nothing but gas, where did the first light come from? How was the first star born? And how did enormous structures such as galaxies begin to form? To understand this, we must first understand the power of gravity. Gravity is the force that pulls every mass toward every other mass. The early universe was not perfectly uniform. In some regions, the density of matter was slightly higher than in others. These differences were incredibly small. If you could have seen them, they might have appeared insignificant. But for gravity, these tiny variations were enough. In the regions where hydrogen and helium were slightly more concentrated, gravity began pulling in even more gas. As more gas gathered in one place, the mass increased. As the mass increased, gravity became stronger. As gravity became stronger, it attracted even more gas. This was a self-reinforcing process. You can think of it like a small snowball rolling down a mountain and gradually growing into a massive sphere of snow. For millions of years, these gas clouds continued to contract. As they shrank, the pressure and temperature at their centers increased. Eventually, the temperature became so high that hydrogen nuclei began to fuse together. This was the decisive moment when the first star was born. A star is born when nuclear fusion begins in its core. During fusion, hydrogen is transformed into helium, and an enormous amount of energy is released. That energy is what makes a star shine. This was the moment when the universe broke its darkness and produced light for the first time. These earliest stars are known as population III stars. Scientists believe they were very different from the stars we see today. They were made almost entirely of hydrogen and helium because heavy elements did not yet exist. They were likely extremely massive, sometimes dozens or even hundreds of times more massive than our sun. Because they were so large, their lives were very short. They burned through their fuel rapidly and died within just a few million years, but their importance was extraordinary. These stars were the first to create carbon, oxygen, and other heavier elements. In other words, the first cosmic furnaces had become active. Now let us talk about galaxies. A star does not always form alone. Within enormous gas clouds, thousands or even millions of stars can be born together. Gravity binds these stars and clouds of gas into a much larger system. That system is called a galaxy. You can think of a galaxy as a vast cosmic city made of stars, gas, dust, dark matter, and gravity. Our own galaxy, the Milky Way, contains approximately 100 to 400 billion stars. And according to modern observations, the observable universe contains hundreds of billions of galaxies. How do we know all of this? NASA's Hubble Space Telescope captured deep-field images that revealed galaxies located billions of light-years away. Later, the James Webb Space Telescope observed even more distant and more ancient galaxies. These observations show that galaxies began forming only a few 100 million years after the Big Bang. Computer simulations tell the same story. When scientists used the known laws of physics and the tiny density fluctuations present in the early universe, matter naturally gathers over time to form stars and galaxies. In other words, theory, simulation, and observation all tell the same story. But the most inspiring idea in this chapter is that stars are not merely sources of light. They are engines of creation. Without them, there would be no chemistry, no planets would form, no oceans would exist, and the possibility of life would never arise. When the first star ignited, the universe took its first major step toward complexity. Out of darkness came structure. Out of structure came light. And from that light began the cosmic evolution that would eventually lead to us. When you look up at the night sky, you are not merely seeing bright points of light. You are witnessing the very process that first illuminated the universe and set creation into motion. Chapter 4: Stardust. So far, we have seen that the first atoms were formed, and then gravity gathered them together to create stars and galaxies. But there was still one major problem. The universe consisted mainly of only hydrogen and helium. These two elements were essential, but they alone could not create planets, oceans, rocks, and complex life. So the question is, where did carbon come from? Where did oxygen come from? Where did iron come from? Where did calcium come from? And most importantly, where did all the elements that make up our bodies originate? The answer takes us deep inside the stars. Stars are not merely glowing objects. They are truly cosmic factories. In their cores, nuclear fusion takes place continuously. Fusion can be understood as a process in which small atoms combine to form larger atoms, releasing tremendous amounts of energy. Stars like our sun convert hydrogen into helium in their cores. This process provides them with the energy to shine for billions of years. But massive stars go much further. When hydrogen begins to run out in the core of a massive star, gravity compresses the star even more. This compression increases the temperature and pressure. Helium is then transformed into carbon. Carbon is converted into oxygen, and then into neon, magnesium, silicon, and eventually iron. Here, a remarkable truth emerges. The carbon in your body, which forms the foundation of every cell, was created in the core of an ancient star. The oxygen atoms in the molecules that carry life to your lungs were forged inside a star. The iron in your blood was produced during the final stages of a massive star's life. The calcium in your bones is also a gift from stellar furnaces. In other words, your body may have formed on Earth, but its raw materials were born inside stars. But one crucial step still remained. These elements were created inside stars, but until they were released into space, they could not be used to form new planets and life. So how do stars spread the elements they create throughout the universe? The answer is a supernova. When a massive star builds up iron in its core, fusion can no longer produce energy. The star can no longer resist the pull of gravity. Its core suddenly collapses and a colossal explosion occurs. This event is called a supernova. In just a few seconds, a supernova can release so much energy that it may outshine an entire galaxy. During this explosion, the elements formed inside the star are scattered into space. Carbon, oxygen, silicon, iron, and many other heavy elements. These elements spread through interstellar space and become part of new clouds of gas and dust. Later, new stars and planets form from these enriched clouds. This means that every new generation of stars is born from the remains of previous generations. The universe gradually becomes richer in chemical complexity. Today's stars, planets, and life are the result of this long cosmic recycling process. But the story does not end here. Some elements heavier than iron, such as gold, platinum, and uranium, are often created during extraordinarily energetic events such as neutron-star mergers. When two neutron stars collide, extreme conditions arise in which nature forges some of the heaviest elements in the periodic table. This means that the gold in your wedding ring may be the product of an ancient cosmic catastrophe. Now the question arises, how do scientists know all of this? They study the light coming from stars. Using a technique called spectroscopy, light is analyzed in detail. Every element produces a unique pattern. By examining these patterns, scientists can determine which elements are present in stars and nebulae. The same signatures are found in supernova remnants. Meteorites, solar spectra, and laboratory physics all point to the same conclusion. We are truly made of stardust. This is not merely a poetic phrase. It is a scientific fact. Most of the atoms in your body are billions of years old. They have witnessed the birth and death of stars. They have traveled through interstellar space. They became part of new planetary systems and eventually helped form life on Earth. When you look at your hand, you are not seeing ordinary matter. You are seeing a cosmic history, atoms that were once forged in the core of ancient stars, elements that traveled through space for billions of years, and eventually organized themselves into structures that can think, feel, and ask questions about their own origin. This is the most profound message of this chapter. The universe created stars, stars created elements, elements created planets, on planets life emerged, and life gave rise to consciousness. So when we say we are made of stardust, it is not a metaphor. It is the literal scientific description of our existence. Chapter 5, Solar Genesis. So far, we have seen that stars transformed hydrogen and helium into heavy elements, and supernova explosions scattered those elements throughout the universe. Carbon, oxygen, silicon, iron, and countless other elements were now present in interstellar space. But one very important question still remained. These elements were dispersed through space, but they were not yet organized into structured forms. There were no planets, no oceans, and no stable world where life could emerge. So how did this scattered stardust transform into an organized planetary system? How was the sun formed? How were the planets created? And how did a rocky world like Earth begin? The answer lies in an extraordinary combination of gravity, time, and cosmic recycling. About 4.567 billion years ago, a vast molecular cloud of gas and dust existed within one of the spiral arms of the Milky Way. This cloud consisted primarily of hydrogen, but it also contained heavy elements produced by earlier generations of stars. This enriched material would eventually become the raw ingredients for planets, rocks, water, and life itself. A nearby supernova shock wave or some other gravitational disturbance triggered a portion of this cloud to collapse. As the cloud began to shrink, its rotation speed increased because of the conservation of angular momentum. You can think of this like a figure skater spinning faster when pulling in her arms. Gradually, the collapsing cloud flattened into a rotating disk. Most of its mass accumulated at the center. Pressure and temperature in the central region continued to rise. Eventually, hydrogen fusion began, and a new star was born, our sun. But the story did not end with the sun. Within the disk surrounding the sun, countless microscopic dust grains were present. At first, these particles were incredibly small, but electrostatic forces and repeated collisions caused them to stick together. Tiny grains became pebbles, pebbles became rocks, and rocks became kilometer-sized planetesimals. At this stage, gravity began to play a crucial role. As these objects grew larger, their gravitational pull became stronger. They started attracting more and more surrounding material. Over millions of years, these planetesimals collided and merged into protoplanets. This process was not orderly. It was violent. Collisions were constant. Some bodies shattered, some merged, some were ejected entirely from the solar system. But gradually, a structured planetary system began to emerge. Close to the sun, temperatures were extremely high. Only refractory materials such as metals and silicates could remain stable. As a result, the inner solar system formed the rocky planets: Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars. Farther from the sun, where temperatures were lower, ices such as water, methane, and ammonia could remain stable. There, the giant planets formed: Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. How do scientists know the age of the solar system with such precision? The answer is hidden in meteorites. Some primitive meteorites preserve the earliest solid materials formed in the solar system. Radiometric dating techniques, especially uranium-lead dating, show that these materials are approximately 4.567 billion years old. This is the accepted age of the solar system, and this theory is confirmed by more than meteorites alone. Atacama Large Millimeter/Submillimeter Array, known as ALMA, has captured extraordinary images of protoplanetary disks surrounding distant young stars. These disks show rings and gaps, the very kinds of structures from which planets form. This demonstrates that planetary formation is not a rare event, but a natural and common process throughout the universe. The most profound realization in this chapter is that the solar system did not appear suddenly. It is the result of billions of particles, countless collisions, and the patient work of gravity. The iron in your body was created inside an ancient star. It was scattered into space by a supernova. That material became part of a molecular cloud. The cloud collapsed. The sun was born. Dust grains joined together. Planets formed. And eventually, Earth came into existence. In other words, your story extends beyond the stars themselves. Your story reaches back to the exact cloud from which the entire solar system was born. When you feel the warmth of sunlight, remember that the sun is not just another star. It is the center of the same cosmic recycling process that spent billions of years organizing matter into an environment where life could become possible. Chapter 6: Earth Rising. So far, we have seen that the formation of the solar system was already underway. The sun was shining at the center, and around it countless rocks, dust particles, and protoplanets were continuously colliding. But at this stage, the solar system was not a calm and orderly place. It was a violent construction zone, where massive collisions were constantly creating and destroying new worlds. Amid these impacts, about 4.54 billion years ago, a planet began to take shape that would eventually become the home of life in the known universe, Earth. But the early Earth looked nothing like the familiar blue world we know today. The young Earth was a molten world. Its surface was covered by vast oceans of liquid rock. Asteroids and comets were constantly crashing into it. Inside the planet, radioactive decay and repeated impacts generated immense heat. If an observer had seen Earth at that time, it would not have appeared to be a life-friendly world, but rather a chaotic planet of fire and stone. Now let us understand how Earth's internal structure formed. When a planet is in a molten state, heavy materials sink downward, while lighter materials rise upward. This process is called planetary differentiation. Dense elements such as iron and nickel sank to the center and formed the core. Above the core, the mantle developed, and the outermost layer became the crust. This differentiation laid the foundation for Earth's magnetic field, plate tectonics, and long-term geological activity. But the most dramatic event in Earth's story was still to come. According to scientists, shortly after Earth formed, a Mars-sized object commonly called Theia collided with Earth. This impact was one of the most important events in the history of the solar system. The collision was so powerful that much of Earth's outer layers and a large portion of the impactor were vaporized and fragmented into space. Some of this material fell back to Earth. But a vast amount remained in orbit around the planet. Over time, this debris gathered under the influence of gravity and formed a new celestial body, the Moon. This explanation is known as the giant impact hypothesis, and it is the most widely accepted scientific model for the formation of the Moon. How do scientists know that the Moon formed in this way? By studying lunar rocks brought back by the Apollo program, scientists discovered that their isotopic composition closely matches that of Earth's outer layers. This suggests that the materials of Earth and the Moon are deeply connected. Computer simulations also show that a collision like the one involving Theia can successfully explain the Moon's formation. In other words, geochemistry, orbital dynamics, and numerical modeling all point to the same conclusion. Now let us understand why the moon is so important. Many people think of the moon as simply a beautiful object in the night sky, but in reality, it has played a crucial role in Earth's habitability. The moon's gravity helps keep Earth's axial tilt relatively stable over long periods of time. If the axial tilt changed chaotically, Earth's climate could become dramatically unstable. This stability has helped maintain relatively predictable seasons and long-term climate consistency. The moon also generates tides, which later influenced coastal ecosystems during important stages of evolution. This means that the moon is not merely Earth's companion. It is an active participant in our planetary history. Now another important question arises. Why did Earth become so special? There are many planets in the solar system, but Earth possessed several extraordinary advantages. It lies within the sun's habitable zone, where liquid water can remain stable for long periods. Its mass is large enough to retain an atmosphere. Its molten iron core generates a magnetic field that protects the planet from harmful solar radiation. And its moon contributes to climate stability. The combination of these factors made Earth a uniquely favorable world. Even so, Earth was not yet ready for life. Its surface was still extremely hot. Its atmosphere was very different. Its oceans had not fully formed. And the conditions necessary for life would take many millions of years to develop. Yet the most profound message of this chapter is that habitability was not the result of a simple accident. It was the outcome of a long chain of cosmic events. Ancient stars created the elements. Those elements formed the solar system. Collisions within the solar system formed Earth. A giant impact created the moon, and the Earth-Moon system together established a stable foundation for future life. When you look at the moon in the night sky, you are not merely seeing a beautiful celestial object. You are seeing the memory of the event that helped Earth become the habitable world it is today. The moon is not just part of our sky, it is part of our origin story. Chapter 7: Blue Planet. By this point, Earth and the moon had already formed, but the Earth of that era looked nothing like the blue, calm, life-filled world we know today. If you had seen the planet then, you would have witnessed a molten world surrounded by volcanoes, constant asteroid impacts, toxic gases, and vast expanses of liquid rock. There was still no breathable atmosphere, no stable oceans, and no conditions suitable for life. The most important question now is this: how did a fiery world transform into a habitable planet filled with water, clouds, and oceans? It was this transformation that truly prepared Earth for life. As Earth gradually cooled, its surface began to solidify into a crust, but cooling was not limited to the surface alone. Intense heat within the planet drove massive volcanic activity. These volcanoes continuously released gases into the atmosphere, including water vapor, carbon dioxide, nitrogen, sulfur compounds, and many others. This process is known as volcanic outgassing. This outgassing formed the foundation of Earth's early atmosphere. That atmosphere was nothing like the oxygen-rich air we breathe today. At that time, free oxygen was almost entirely absent. If a modern human were transported to that world, they would not survive a single breath. Yet many of the chemical ingredients necessary for life were now present in the atmosphere. Now we come to water. Where did Earth's water come from? This question has long been a subject of scientific investigation. Today, scientists believe that Earth's water likely came from two primary sources. The first source was volcanic outgassing. Water vapor trapped within Earth's interior was released into the atmosphere. The second source was water-rich asteroids and some comets, which delivered additional water during impacts on the young planet. Most likely, both of these processes contributed to filling Earth with water. As Earth's temperature continued to decline, the water vapor in the atmosphere began to condense. Clouds formed, then, for millions of years, torrential rain fell across the planet. Imagine an Earth where rain falls continuously for such a vast span of time that immense basins gradually fill and become oceans. This was the birth of Earth's first seas. Geological evidence indicates that liquid water existed on Earth very early in its history. Ancient zircon crystals discovered in Western Australia suggest that as early as 4.4 billion years ago, Earth already had a cooled crust and possibly liquid water. This discovery is extraordinarily important. It means that conditions on Earth began stabilizing surprisingly soon after the planet formed. Now let us understand why oceans are so important. Water is not just an ordinary liquid. It is the universal medium of chemistry. It dissolves molecules. It brings them into contact with one another. It enables chemical reactions. It helps regulate temperature, and it supports long-term climate stability. In other words, water transformed Earth into a vast natural laboratory. Now consider the role of the atmosphere. Nitrogen, carbon dioxide, and water vapor strongly influenced surface conditions. The greenhouse effect kept Earth warm enough for liquid water to remain stable over long periods. Without an atmosphere, Earth's temperature would have undergone extreme fluctuations, making stable oceans difficult to maintain. The atmosphere also created a dynamic interface between incoming radiation and surface chemistry, an environment where prebiotic molecules could form. At this point, Earth possessed three extraordinary ingredients: a stable rocky planet, oceans filled with liquid water, and a chemically active atmosphere. These were the essential conditions required for life to emerge, but one critical step still remained. Chemistry had to become biology. Molecules had to learn to organize themselves. Systems had to develop the ability to store and copy information. Earth was now prepared, but life had not yet begun. The most profound message of this chapter is that habitability is not a simple feature. It is the result of countless interconnected processes: the correct distance from the sun, long-term cooling, volcanic outgassing, water accumulation, atmospheric stabilization. Together, these processes transformed Earth into a uniquely favorable environment. When you stand beside the ocean or watch raindrops falling from the sky, you are not merely observing a natural scene. You are witnessing the legacy of an ancient transformation that prepared a lifeless world for life. The oceans are not just water. They are the remnants of the vast laboratory in which the first chapter of life was eventually written. Chapter 8, Life Begins. By this point, our story has reached the moment when Earth was finally ready for life. A stable rocky planet existed. It possessed oceans filled with liquid water. A chemically active atmosphere surrounded it. Volcanoes were continuously releasing new compounds. Lightning, ultraviolet radiation, and geothermal energy were constantly supplying energy to the environment. But now the greatest question emerges. Even with all of these ingredients in place, how did non-living molecules transform into living systems? When did matter first begin to organize itself? When did chemistry learn to store information? And when did the first system appear on Earth that could make copies of itself? This is the question known as the origin of life, or abiogenesis. It is one of the most profound and challenging questions in all of science. First, let us clarify one important point. Scientists possess strong clues about how life began, but the exact step-by-step sequence is still not fully known. We know that life is extremely ancient. We know that many essential molecules can form naturally. But every intermediate step between chemistry and the first living cell remains an active area of research. Now let us consider what life actually requires. At minimum, three fundamental capabilities are necessary. The first is information storage, the ability to preserve instructions. The second is replication, the ability to make copies. The third is compartmentalization, the presence of a boundary that allows reactions to occur within a controlled environment. If a system develops these three capabilities, chemistry can gradually become biology. In 1953, Stanley Miller and Harold Urey performed a famous experiment. They combined gases thought to resemble those of the early Earth with water and electrical sparks. After several days, amino acids were found in the apparatus, the molecules that serve as the building blocks of proteins. This experiment demonstrated for the first time that the basic organic molecules of life can form under natural conditions. Although scientists now believe that Earth's early atmosphere was likely more complex, the historical significance of this experiment remains immense. It showed that organic chemistry does not depend on any supernatural event. Now let us turn to the RNA world hypothesis. In living organisms today, DNA stores information and proteins perform most cellular functions, but RNA is a remarkable molecule. It can store information and, under certain conditions, catalyze chemical reactions. In other words, RNA has the potential to perform both roles. For this reason, many scientists believe that RNA-like molecules may have played a crucial role in the earliest stages of self-replication. Another powerful idea is the hydrothermal vent hypothesis. Deep beneath the oceans, hydrothermal vents provide hot, mineral-rich environments. These locations contain temperature gradients, catalytic minerals, and abundant chemical energy. Many researchers believe that such environments may have helped complex molecules organize and develop primitive metabolic systems. Now let us consider compartmentalization. Fat-like molecules can spontaneously form tiny vesicles in water. These vesicles can function as primitive membranes. If information-carrying molecules and chemical reactions become concentrated within such compartments, early protocells may emerge. This means that life may not have begun through a single sudden miracle, but through a series of gradual steps. Organic molecules formed, information-carrying systems developed, membranes emerged. Self-replication became more reliable, and natural selection began favoring more efficient systems. At this point, chemistry began to acquire evolutionary dynamics. Now we come to the most important evidence. Western Australia and other regions contain stromatolites and isotopic signatures that indicate life existed at least 3.5 billion years ago, and perhaps even earlier. This means that life appeared within only a few 100 million years after Earth formed. On a cosmic timescale, this is astonishingly rapid. This observation suggests two important possibilities. Either life emerges relatively easily when the right conditions are present, or Earth's conditions were extraordinarily favorable. Both possibilities carry deep scientific and philosophical significance. The most profound message of this chapter is that life does not violate the laws of matter. Life may be an emergent expression of those very laws. Atoms formed molecules. Molecules learned to store information. Information developed replication. Replication gave rise to evolution, and evolution eventually made possible every living organism, every ecosystem, and ultimately human consciousness. When you think about any single cell in your body, remember that its ancestry reaches back to the moment when non-living chemistry first organized itself into a living form. That transition may have been microscopic, but its consequences were transformative on a cosmic scale, because at that moment, the universe produced systems that could survive, adapt, and pass their information into the future. Chapter 9: First Cells. So far, we have seen that Earth became ready for life. Organic molecules were formed, and some chemical systems developed the ability to store information and make copies of themselves. But one very important step still remained. Molecules existed, and reactions were taking place, but life needed a stable structure, an entity capable of controlling chemistry within itself, using energy, and passing its information to the next generation. This is where the story of the first cells begins. The simplest way to understand a cell is to think of it as the basic unit of life. Just as atoms are the fundamental units of matter, cells are the fundamental units of living systems. Every organism on Earth, whether a bacterium, a tree, a whale, or a human, is made of cells. But the first cells were not as complex as modern cells. They were extremely simple. They had no nucleus. They had no specialized organelles, yet they possessed three extraordinary abilities. They could obtain energy from the environment. They could maintain their internal chemistry, and they could make copies of themselves. Such simple cells are known as prokaryotes. Today, bacteria and archaea belong to this category. Scientists believe that the earliest life forms on Earth were prokaryotic organisms. Now consider how revolutionary this step was. Previously, molecules existed separately. Now they had become organized within a membrane, forming a self-sustaining system. It is like individual electronic components suddenly assembling into a functioning computer. The membrane separated the cell from the external environment. Genetic molecules stored instructions. Chemical reactions transformed energy into useful work, and replication ensured continuity. Life was no longer just chemistry. It had become an organized and evolving system. Evidence indicates that such cells are extremely ancient. Western Australia and other regions contain stromatolites that are at least 3.5 billion years old. Stromatolites are layered structures built by microbial communities, especially bacteria. Living stromatolites still exist today in places such as Shark Bay. When scientists compare modern stromatolites with ancient fossils, they find striking similarities. In addition, carbon isotope signatures indicate traces of biological activity in very ancient rocks. The geological record tells us that life became established on Earth very early. Now let us understand another important point. Although complex organisms such as humans appear extraordinary to us today, most of Earth's history was dominated by microscopic life. For more than 2 billion years, simple single-celled organisms were the primary forms of life on the planet. There were no animals, no plants, no forests, no dinosaurs, and certainly no humans. Yet this era was profoundly important. These microbes began altering the chemistry of the planet. They developed new metabolic pathways, they influenced the atmosphere, and they laid the foundation for all future complexity. If the first cells had not succeeded, the entire later story of evolution would never have been written. How do scientists know that all modern life forms share a common ancestry? The answer lies in genetics and biochemistry. Nearly all organisms on Earth use DNA or RNA. The genetic code is almost universal. Cells use ATP as their energy currency. Proteins are built from nearly the same set of amino acids. These remarkable similarities indicate that all known life forms descended from an ancient common ancestor. This ancestor is often called LUCA, the last universal common ancestor. An important point is that LUCA was not the first life form. Rather, it was the most recent common population from which all known organisms ultimately descended. The most profound message of this chapter is that life did not merely learn how to appear, it learned how to endure. The first cells preserved information. They made replication reliable. They allowed evolution to continue without interruption. And because of that continuity, every cell in your body today is part of the same ancient cellular tradition. When you think about a single cell in your body, remember that its design principles have been refined over billions of years. Cell membranes, genetic information, metabolism, replication. All of these features are the legacy of the ancient breakthrough that gave life a permanent foothold on Earth. In this sense, every cell in your body is like a living fossil, thoroughly modern, yet carrying within it billions of years of evolutionary wisdom. Chapter 10: Oxygen Revolution. By this point, life had already become established on Earth. First, simple cells had spread throughout the oceans. They were obtaining energy, reproducing, and gradually developing new metabolic strategies. But the Earth of that time was very different from the one we know today. Free oxygen was almost entirely absent from the atmosphere. If a modern human were transported to that era, they would not survive a single breath. Now an extremely important question arises. If there was no oxygen, how did today's oxygen-rich atmosphere come into existence? And was Earth's atmosphere always like this? The answer takes us into the world of microscopic organisms. Between approximately 2.7 and 2.4 billion years ago, certain bacteria-like organisms developed an extraordinary ability: photosynthesis. In simple terms, photosynthesis is a process in which organisms use the energy of sunlight to produce organic molecules from carbon dioxide and water. But this process generated a byproduct, oxygen. Today, plants perform this process, but the first organisms to evolve this capability were cyanobacteria. At first, this oxygen did not accumulate in the atmosphere. Why not? Because Earth's oceans contained large amounts of dissolved iron. As oxygen entered the water, it reacted with the iron to form iron oxides. These compounds were deposited in geological layers known as banded iron formations. By studying these rocks, scientists can see how oxygen began to transform Earth's chemistry. You can think of it like filling a room with water. At first, the water fills every empty container. Only after all the containers are full does water begin to collect on the floor. In the same way, early oxygen first filled chemical sinks. Once those sinks became saturated, oxygen began to accumulate in the atmosphere. This event is known as the Great Oxygenation Event. It was one of the most transformative events in Earth's history. For the first time, the composition of the atmosphere began to change fundamentally. But this transformation was not beneficial to all organisms. Most life forms at the time were anaerobic. They lived without oxygen. For them, oxygen was a toxic substance. The oxygen revolution was therefore also a global ecological crisis. Many ancient organisms disappeared or were confined to oxygen-free environments. But this is the nature of evolution. When environments change, they also create new opportunities. The presence of oxygen provided a revolutionary advantage: aerobic respiration. In this process, cells use oxygen to extract far more energy from food molecules. This increase in energy efficiency was so significant that it eventually made possible complex cells, multicellular organisms, animals, and ultimately humans. In other words, oxygen is not merely the gas we breathe. It is the energetic foundation of complex life. How do scientists know that this event truly occurred? Multiple independent lines of evidence support it: banded iron formations, sulfur isotope signatures, ancient sediments, geochemical models. All of these indicate that atmospheric oxygen increased dramatically around 2.4 billion years ago. When geology, chemistry, and microbiology all converge on the same conclusion, scientific confidence becomes extremely strong. The most remarkable aspect of this chapter is that no giant organism was responsible for this planetary transformation. No tree, no animal, no advanced life form, only microscopic cyanobacteria, organisms so small that they cannot be seen with the naked eye, yet they used sunlight to transform the entire atmosphere of Earth. They altered the chemistry of the oceans, they influenced the climate, and they permanently changed the course of evolution. Every breath you take today is part of the legacy of that ancient microbial innovation. The oxygen entering your lungs is the result of processes that microbes began billions of years ago. In other words, the foundation of complex life on Earth was established not by grand creatures, but by microscopic organisms. They gradually transformed the atmosphere. The atmosphere transformed metabolism. Metabolism made complexity possible, and complexity ultimately gave rise to consciousness. The most profound message of this chapter is that the greatest transformations in history are sometimes accomplished by the smallest forms of life. Cyanobacteria built no cities. They developed no language, they created no technology, but they produced the gas without which we would not exist. Chapter 11: Complex Life. By this point, life had already become firmly established on Earth. Simple cells, which we know today as bacteria and archaea, had survived successfully on Earth for billions of years. They filled the oceans, transformed the atmosphere, and provided powerful resources such as oxygen. Yet despite this success, life was still microscopic and relatively simple. Now an important question arises. If simple cells were so successful, why did complex life need to evolve? And what breakthrough eventually made highly sophisticated organisms such as plants, animals, and humans possible? The answer lies in one of the most extraordinary events in biology. This is not a story of competition. It is a story of cooperation. Between approximately 2.1 and 1.8 billion years ago, a relationship formed between certain cells that permanently changed the course of evolution. This process is called endosymbiosis. The term may sound technical, but the concept is simple. Imagine that one cell engulfed another smaller cell. Normally, the larger organism would digest the smaller one. But this time, something different happened. The engulfed cell was not destroyed. It remained alive. And gradually, the two cells began living together. The host cell provided protection and resources. The internal cell helped produce energy. Over time, this temporary partnership became a permanent alliance. That internal organism eventually evolved into the mitochondrion. Mitochondrion is often called the powerhouse of the cell. Mitochondria use oxygen to extract large amounts of ATP, the energy currency used by cells. ATP is the molecule that every cell in your body uses for nearly every biological process. Walking, thinking, breathing, heartbeats, nerve signaling, everything depends on ATP. Now consider the significance of this event. Simple cells had access to energy, but only in limited amounts. With mitochondria, cells gained a far more efficient energy system. It was as if a small village suddenly received access to a massive electrical power grid. Now much more energy was available. Larger genomes became possible. Internal structures developed. Specialized functions emerged, and cellular complexity increased dramatically. These complex cells are known as eukaryotes. Eukaryotic cells contain a nucleus, where DNA is protected. They possess membrane-bound organelles. Their internal organization is far more advanced. Plants, fungi, animals, and humans are all composed of eukaryotic cells. This means that every cell in your body is a direct descendant of that ancient symbiotic event. How do scientists know that mitochondria were once independent bacteria? The evidence is remarkably compelling. Mitochondria possess their own DNA. That DNA is circular, just like bacterial DNA. Mitochondria are surrounded by two membranes. They divide independently. Their ribosomes resemble bacterial ribosomes. Genetic analysis shows that their ancestry is closely related to specific bacterial lineages. When anatomy, genetics, and molecular biology all point to the same conclusion, scientific confidence becomes extremely strong. A second similar event occurred in plants. A eukaryotic cell engulfed a photosynthetic cyanobacterium. That organism eventually became the chloroplast. Chloroplast gives plants the ability to capture energy from sunlight. This means that the foundation of complex life is based on repeated biological partnerships. Competition is part of evolution, but cooperation is equally powerful. The most profound message of this chapter is that complexity often emerges through integration. One cell alone was limited, two different organisms cooperated, and that cooperation transformed the possibilities of life. Without it, there would be no trees, no forests, no animals. No humans, and no brain capable of understanding this story. When you think about a single cell in your body, remember that thousands of mitochondria are working inside it. They are not merely organelles. They are the living descendants of an ancient alliance that solved the problem of energy and redirected the course of evolution. In other words, an ancient partnership is still active within you at the microscopic level. Every heartbeat, every thought, every movement depends on a collaboration that began nearly 2 billion years ago. Chapter 12, Many as One. By this point, life had already completed an extraordinary journey. Simple cells had evolved into complex eukaryotic cells. Mitochondria provided cells with vast amounts of energy. Internal organization became more sophisticated. Genetic control grew increasingly advanced. Yet despite these developments, life was still mostly single-celled. Now a very important question arises. If a single cell could survive on its own, why did millions and billions of cells need to come together to form one organism? And how did cells discover a path to cooperation on such a massive scale? The answer lies in the next great breakthrough of evolution: multicellularity. The ability of many cells to function as one coordinated system. To understand this, think about your own body. You are made of trillions of cells, but these cells do not live independent lives. Some are brain cells, some are muscle cells, some are blood cells, some are skin cells. Each cell has a different role, but all share the same genetic blueprint and work for the benefit of a single organism. This organization is one of the most remarkable achievements in biological history. but its beginnings were likely very simple. Perhaps some cells did not fully separate after division. They remained together as colonies. At first, each cell was probably nearly identical, but natural selection favored groups in which some cells began to specialize in specific tasks. Some became better at movement, some at absorbing nutrients, some at reproduction. Gradually, a division of labor emerged, and this specialization became the foundation of multicellular organisms. You can think of it like a single person who can accomplish only a limited amount. But when many people cooperate and take on different responsibilities, they can build cities, institutions, and civilizations. In the same way, cells elevated biological cooperation to an entirely new level. Now tissues could form, organs could develop, large body sizes became possible, and organisms could interact with their environments in far more sophisticated ways. But multicellularity was not easy. Cells had to learn to communicate. They had to determine which cells would divide and which would adopt specialized roles. They had to suppress uncontrolled growth. Even today, cancer reminds us how complex the challenge of maintaining multicellular cooperation truly is. How do scientists know that multicellularity evolved independently many times? Evidence shows that multicellularity arose separately in plants, animals, fungi, and algae. This means that when the right conditions and genetic tools are available, evolution can repeatedly arrive at this powerful solution. This is an important insight. Complexity was not merely an accident. It is a repeatable possibility in nature. We also find evidence of early multicellular organisms in the fossil record. About 600 million years ago, during the Ediacaran period, soft-bodied organisms began to appear on Earth. They did not resemble modern animals, but they demonstrated that life was no longer confined to the microscopic world. Organisms were now reaching sizes measured in centimeters and even meters. This marked the beginning of a new era of complexity. The roots of multicellular life likely extend even further back, when simple colonies and primitive multicellular forms were first evolving. The most profound message of this chapter is that evolution has repeatedly used the same principle. Cooperation creates new levels of possibility. Atoms combine to form molecules. Molecules combine to form cells. Cells combine to form complex organisms. And organisms combine to create ecosystems and societies. The entire story of complexity is a story of meaningful collaboration among smaller units. When you think about your own body, remember that you are not a single entity. You are a highly coordinated community of trillions of cells. Each cell performs its role. Each tissue is specialized. Each organ is interconnected. And this entire system is the result of billions of years of evolutionary experimentation. If multicellularity had never evolved, there would be no forests, no fish, no dinosaurs, no mammals, and certainly no humans. Multicellularity was not merely a biological innovation. It was the step that freed life from microscopic limits and gave rise to the full diversity of the visible world. When you look at your hand, you are not merely seeing flesh and bone. You are seeing a living civilization of trillions of cooperating cells. Chapter 13, Cosmic Legacy. By this point, we have completed a journey that began long before any civilization, any species, or even the Earth itself. We have seen that approximately 13.8 billion years ago, the universe began to expand. From that expansion, hydrogen and helium were formed. Gravity gathered these atoms together to create stars and galaxies. Within the cores of stars, carbon, oxygen, iron, and all the elements that make up our bodies were forged. From those elements, the solar system was formed. Earth and the moon were born. Earth cooled. The atmosphere and oceans developed. Chemistry gave rise to life. Simple cells emerged. Microbes transformed Earth's atmosphere with oxygen. Complex cells evolved. And then multicellular life reached an entirely new level of complexity. Now a profoundly important question arises. Where do we fit into this story? Are humans separate from the universe? Or are we part of the same cosmic process that created stars and planets? Science gives a remarkably clear answer. We are not separate from the universe. We are one expression of the universe itself. Let us understand this step by step. The hydrogen atoms in your body are nearly as old as the universe itself. The carbon in your body was created in the cores of ancient stars. The iron in your blood was forged during the final stages of massive stars. The calcium in your bones is the product of stellar explosions. The basic design of your cells is inherited from the first cells that emerged on Earth billions of years ago. Your mitochondria are the descendants of the ancient symbiosis that made complex life possible. And your entire body is a multicellular civilization of trillions of cooperating cells. In other words, your existence is not the result of a single isolated event. Within you resides the combined history of cosmology, astronomy, geology, chemistry, biology, and evolution. When you look at the palm of your hand, you are not merely seeing skin, muscles, and bones. You are seeing a continuous history stretching back 13.8 billion years, a chain that has never been broken. The Big Bang created atoms. Atoms formed stars. Stars forged elements. Elements formed planets. On planets, life emerged. Life evolved into consciousness. And consciousness is now asking questions about its own origin. This is the most extraordinary aspect of the entire story. The universe first created structure, then it created complexity, then it created life, and eventually, it gave rise to beings capable of trying to understand the universe itself. When you look up at the night sky, you are not looking at something external to you. You are looking at your deepest ancestry. The same physical laws that formed galaxies also shaped your cells. The same atoms forged in distant stars now exist within your body. And the same evolutionary principles that transformed simple molecules into living systems eventually led to your brain. This realization has both scientific and philosophical significance. Scientifically, it is a fact that we are made of stardust and are part of an uninterrupted lineage of life. Philosophically, it means that we are not merely observers of the cosmos. We are participants in its story. Some people say that humans are insignificant because the universe is so vast, but consider another perspective. This vast universe created conditions in which matter gave rise to life, life gave rise to intelligence, and intelligence is now reflecting on the meaning of existence. That is not insignificance, it is cosmic continuity. This chapter is not the end of our journey, but a transition. So far, we have watched the stage being prepared. The universe formed, Earth formed, life emerged, complexity evolved. Now the next question is this: which branch of the vast tree of life eventually gave rise to humans? Who were our earliest ancestors? How are we connected to primates? And how did evolution transform us into the species known as Homo sapiens? That is where the next part of our story will begin. But before we continue, one final realization. You are not merely a living organism on Earth. You are made from the ashes of ancient stars. Your cells carry billions of years of biological memory, and your mind is part of a universe trying to understand itself. In this sense, we do not merely live in the universe. The universe is alive within us. Final chapter, the human journey. If you have followed this entire journey carefully, then you now understand that our story does not begin with any country, any civilization, or even with Earth itself. Our story begins 13.8 billion years ago, when the universe first started to expand. From that expansion came atoms, from atoms came stars, from stars came elements, from elements came Earth, on Earth life emerged, and billions of years later, that same process gave rise to us. This means that we do not merely exist within the universe, we are part of the universe's continuous story. But our journey has only just begun. So far, we have seen how the universe prepared the stage. In the next part, we will discover how life gradually evolved into primates, how our earliest ancestors emerged from those primates, and how the evolutionary path began that eventually led to Homo sapiens. In part 2, we will explore how science reconstructs our past using fossils, genetics, radiometric dating, and the scientific tools that allow us to understand events that occurred millions and even billions of years ago. If you found this video insightful, subscribe to the channel to continue this journey. Like the video, because it helps this knowledge reach more people. And be sure to leave a comment telling us which moment in this entire cosmic story you found the most extraordinary. I will meet you in the next part, where we will learn how scientists tell the story of our origins with such confidence. Until then, whenever you look up at the night sky, remember, you are not merely looking at the stars, you are looking at your own origin.